Afternoon, everyone, evening, whatever, whenever I upload this. It's me, Jay Hartha, Jerry Siddhartha, and it's another installment of Steering Wheel Chronicles. Um, and today we'll be discussing empathy. And by the way, my eyes may shift. See, like I said before, my screen's over here, camera's over here. Anyhow, I want to talk about empathy a little bit, and personally my steps on how to empathize with someone, because I feel like one of the greatest problems that we have as a community of people is we don't know how to truly empathize, or we don't really necessarily attempt to, and thing is that if we're going to have differences and we're going to make it known we have differences and put so much attention towards it, we might as well try to learn how to understand. Now, I'm going to do a different video on the difference between sympathy and empathy and blah, blah, blah. But for now, empathy, as defined by Merriam-Webster.com, it is the feeling that you understand and share another person's experiences and emotions, or the ability to share someone else's feelings. Now, before I get into this, these steps, I want to share kind of like a comparison type of thing, where I use this when trying to tell people that we shouldn't try to compare each other's suffering and pain, because if we do that, that's when things pretty much just go haywire and we start becoming resentful and judging people for handling situations in ways that we feel like they shouldn't, or they should handle them better or worse because this person has it worse than that person. And the example I love to use is a comparison of two children, one from a wealthy background and one from an impoverished background. Let's say, you have this one kid from a wealthy background who has a dog that's been with him ever since he was an infant, basically probably about 2-3 years old. This kid grows up, doesn't have many friends, stays in an isolated neighborhood, isn't really the most well-known person at school, and even if he is, sometimes you wonder about money and friends, if that's why they're attracted to you. So, this kid has this dog that's been with him since day one. Say the kid's about 10, 12, and the dog gets hit by a car in the middle of the street. He witnesses his dog get hit by a car in the middle of the street, and the dog dies. And now, take the kid from the impoverished background, very community oriented in the sense that everybody knows everyone. Maybe not everybody's for everyone, but everybody knows everyone. And so, but he has a best friend, a clique of friends, but focusing on the best friend, it's been his best friend since day one. Has known this kid since like maybe kindergarten, first grade, around 5-6 years old. They come up, and then probably about 10-12 years old as well, his best friend gets gunned down in the street, by maybe some crossfire from some neighborhood violence or something. So he witnesses his best friend get gunned down. Now tell me, which kid had the most painful experience? See, the average, I'm not going to overgeneralize and say the average person, but it would be more commonly perceived that the kid who watched his best friend, his human best friend, get shot down would be the one who's dealing with the heavier issue. In terms of debates, in terms of people you confront when these issues pop up. A kid can say, oh, my dog died. Well, my friend died. This pain is clearly more severe than yours. But if you look at the situations are so specific to them, the pain could easily be equal. It could be the same. And now, I say this as a prerequisite, kind of, sort of. But I want to use that example when applying empathy, because that's a situation where empathy And empathizing and trying to understand someone else's experience would play a big part in preventing an argument of conflict of who has it worse. Now, I'll get back to that a little bit. So let me start out with like I said, these are going to be steps I use to empathize with people. First and foremost, when wanting to express empathy, understand, blah, 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 you want to be open and listen. Make sure you're listening to what that person has to say. You're not listening to respond. You're listening just to listen, to hear everything that they're saying. Once you do that, you should, in my opinion, once you do that, you also want to see if you have experienced that same experience, if you've gone through the same exact thing. And even if you have gone through that same exact thing, imagine the situation and or your feelings from that situation being 10 times worse than it was when you experienced it. Also, if you haven't experienced that specific situation, it would be helpful to think of any similar situation you have had, anything that could be remotely close, like somebody's TV getting stolen out their house got broken into and their TV was stolen. Okay, so that happened to them. They had just dropped all this money on this TV. Well, I didn't lose. My big screen TV wasn't stolen, but a couple years back, my book bag with one of my favorite books in it was stolen, and imagine that situation being 10 times worse. The situation you relay, always make it so much more worse than it actually was. And I say that because you never truly know the depths of which something is impacting a person. So it's better to start, instead of starting from the highest possibility of feeling, in a sense that instead of thinking of it as in, they're probably okay, think about it as being something that could possibly be ultimately detrimental to them. Possibly, you never know. It may not be that big of a deal to them, but when you're trying to make sure you're feeling the depths of whatever, the possibility of the depths, you want to start at the lowest point that the person could be feeling. So that's why I say always make it that much worse. After that, you will also want to consider that person as much as you can. Think about their personality, their background, the family that they come from, what you know about them. Especially if it's somebody close to you. Especially if it's somebody close to you. Filter all the information you know about them, as quickly as you can process it, of course, but filter all that information out, because those personality differences play a key factor. Me and my brother, I'm more of a reserved person. He's more of an outspoken person. And so if something hits me, sometimes he's had trouble understanding how I would feel about something because of the fact that we come from the same exact background. And so us having the same exact upbringing, he sometimes doesn't understand why things hit me so much harder than they, bother him. But it's because of our personality differences. We may have grew up in the same houses, but we've also had different experiences in schools and in social environments, so on and so forth. So you also want to make sure that you're considering all these factors about this person. Because I've heard someone say before that when they empathize with somebody, they imagine if the situation happened to them and what they would do in if they were in that person's shoes. And that's not really empathy. That's just putting yourself in that situation. That doesn't in the slightest bring attention to how that person is feeling. It's just how you would feel in that situation. And that's something different. So yeah, you want to make sure you consider all these factors. And after all of that, that's pretty much the basic makeup. I'm not trying to make this video too long. I might have to do another part to this, but that's basically the makeup of it. You know, you want to make sure you have a listening ear. You want to make sure that you're considering how deep the impact could possibly be, and you want to make sure you're considering that person on every level possible of what you know about that person, what you assume, which that could be a little bit dangerous. Hear me now. Assumption could be a little dangerous, but it's helpful in the sense of you understanding where that person is coming from, especially if you know that person extremely well. If you don't know that person very well, that's where it's even more important that you use your listening ear, because sometimes you have to take what someone says for face value, especially if you don't know them that well. You know, you have to, I'm sorry I'm using the word have so much. I should be saying should, or should try to. But you should try to, at best, you know, take what they say at face value and respond accordingly. If you know that person fairly well, you should still take what they say at face value and respond accordingly to that to a degree, but also keep in mind what you know, the little hidden facades that they like to put on, hidden aspects and the facades that they like to put on. But yeah, because pulling back to the example I used about the two kids, you know, you have these two kids, two different situations, but they are very, very similar at the end of the day when you consider that this one kid who saw his human best friend die has been surrounded by humans, but the kid who had his best friend die that was a dog, you know, didn't have that as much human interaction, didn't have as many genuine friends, didn't know as many people closely. So that dog was his main confidant, just as that human was for the other human. And them being so young also makes the impact so great. So yeah, this is just, like I said, I might do another part to this, probably will. I also want to talk about empathy versus sympathy, and I got some other discussion topics coming up later, but these are kind of my steps in trying to empathize with somebody, part one, I guess. So much more to it, but I just had to do this real quick, and this video is probably longer than I want it to be. But yeah, Steering Wheel Chronicles, Jay Hartha, I'm out.